A car with an airplane propeller at the front could chop pedestrians like a blender, drive away without you after you started it, and somehow was completely legal on the streets of Paris. Between 1919 and 1927, a French engineer who missed becoming an aviation legend by 3 weeks decided to put airplane propellers on cars instead. This is the story of the Leyat Helica. The butterfly man who wanted to fly. Marcel Leyat was born on March 26, 1885, in Dieppe, a small mountain town in southeastern France. While other children played normal games, young Marcel spent his time jumping off roofs and walls with homemade wings strapped to his arms. His school friends gave him a nickname that stuck, the Butterfly Man. Most kids eventually give up on impossible dreams like human flight. Marcel Leyat was not most kids. He studied hard and graduated from École Centrale Paris in 1907 with an engineering degree. But Leyat did not want to design bridges or build factories. He wanted to build machines that could fly. In 1908, just 23 years old, he constructed his first aircraft, a biplane glider he named Quand Même. The name translates to nevertheless in English. It was a perfect name for a man who would spend his life refusing to give up on wild ideas. By 1909, Leyat had built a second glider. This one actually worked. He attached it to a de Dion-Bouton automobile with a tow line. The car pulled the glider across a field until it lifted into the air. Leyat flew at 10 meters elevation for 200 meters. It was not much, but it was flight. He was getting closer to his dream. Then came the summer of 1909. Leyat was preparing to attempt something that had never been done before. He wanted to be the first person to fly a powered aircraft across the English Channel. He worked frantically to prepare his machine. The whole world was watching to see who would accomplish this incredible feat first. On July 25, 1909, a French aviator named Louis Blériot succeeded. He flew across the English Channel in his Blériot aircraft and became an instant legend. His name went into every history book. Marcel Leyat had lost the race by just 3 weeks. Most people would have been crushed by this failure. Leyat responded differently. If he could not change aviation history in the sky, perhaps he could revolutionize what moved on the ground instead. Cars are built wrong. Leyat looked at the automobiles of the early 1900s with an engineer's critical eye. What he saw disgusted him. Every car used the same basic design. An engine turned a crankshaft. The crankshaft connected to a transmission. The transmission connected to a drive shaft. The drive shaft connected to a differential. The differential finally turned the wheels. As an aviation engineer, Leyat knew something most car designers did not understand. All those mechanical parts were not free. Every gear, every shaft, every bearing absorbed energy. According to his calculations, 30 to 40% of an engine's power got wasted just pushing energy through the transmission and drive train. Nearly half the power disappeared before it ever reached the wheels. What if you could eliminate all of that? What if you removed the transmission, the clutch, the differential, and the drive shaft completely? Leyat's solution was elegant in its simplicity and absolutely insane in its execution. Just attach an airplane propeller directly to the engine's crankshaft. Let the propeller pull the car forward the same way it pulls an airplane through the sky. No complicated mechanical parts, no wasted energy, just pure thrust pushing you down the road. In November 1913, Leyat founded a company called Les Établissements Leyat in Paris. He built his first prototype and named it the helicocycle. It had 3 wheels for stability and a JAP engine mounted on top. At the front spun a large wooden propeller, completely exposed and unprotected. It looked like someone had taken an airplane, removed the wings, and bolted the fuselage to 3 bicycle wheels. Leyat was ready to show his invention to the world. Then, in August 1914, World War I began. Everything stopped. The captain of propellers. When war erupted across Europe, Leyat joined the French military. He served in the artillery at first, firing cannons at enemy positions. But the French military soon realized they had an aviation engineer sitting in a muddy trench when he could be doing something more valuable. Leyat was promoted to captain and given an important position. He became Captain Marcel Leyat, chief of the Service des Hélices. This was the propeller service at the French military's technical aviation branch. For the next 4 years, Leyat designed, built, and studied propellers. He learned everything about how wooden blades move through air and generate thrust. During this time, he also worked on aircraft designs. He created plans for a living wing bomber that could carry 500 kilograms of bombs over 1,000 kilometers. His designs featured articulated wings that could change shape during flight. Remarkably, Leyat's original helicocycle prototype followed him to the war. He proposed using it as a military liaison vehicle. The French army could use it to carry messages quickly between different positions. The military was interested enough to request tests, but after seeing the exposed propeller spinning at the front, they decided against it. The army was not ready to deploy a vehicle that could accidentally chop up its own soldiers. When the war finally ended in 1918, Marcel Leyat had become one of France's leading experts on propeller design. He also still had a burning desire to prove that his vision for propeller-powered cars was correct. Birth of the Helica. In 1919, Leyat got his chance. He landed a job as an engineer at Levasseur, a propeller manufacturing company in Paris. The company agreed to finance the construction of a new and improved propeller car. Leyat built it at a factory located at 27 Quai de Grenelle in the 15th district of Paris, right along the banks of the Seine River. This new machine was called the Helica. The name came from hélice, which is the French word for propeller. Unlike the 3-wheeled helicocycle, this new version had 4 wheels for better stability and control. The body was constructed entirely from plywood, the same lightweight material used to build airplane fuselages. This made the Helica incredibly light. The entire car weighed just 550 to 625 pounds, which is 250 to 284 kilograms. To put that in perspective, a Ford Model T from the same era weighed nearly twice as much. The shape was unlike anything anyone had ever seen on a road. Leyat designed a fully streamlined, teardrop-shaped body. The front was rounded and smooth. The back tapered to a sharp point. There were no sharp edges or flat surfaces. Every curve was carefully shaped to slip through the air with minimum resistance. Leyat was not just building a car. He was building a ground-based aircraft. At the front sat a British-made ABC Motors flat-twin engine. This compact engine produced somewhere between 18 and 30 horsepower, depending on the specific model. Mounted directly to the engine's crankshaft was a 2-bladed wooden propeller, approximately 1.4 meters in diameter. That is about 4.5 feet across. When Levasseur executives saw the completed Helica, they made a decision. They would not mass-produce it. Instead, they simply gave the prototype to Leyat as payment for his work. Once again, Marcel Leyat was on his own. How to drive a propeller car. Driving a Leyat Helica was nothing like driving any car that came before it, or any car that has existed since. Starting the car was an adventure by itself. There was no electric starter or ignition key. You had to get out of the cockpit, walk around to the front, and pull a starting cord attached to the engine. This was exactly like starting a lawnmower. The engine would roar to life, and the propeller would begin spinning immediately. Here is where things got dangerous. The Helica had no handbrake. It had no neutral gear. The moment that propeller started spinning, the car started moving forward. You had to sprint from the front of the car back to the cockpit and jump in before the vehicle drove away without you. steering was completely backwards compared to normal automobiles. Most cars turn the front wheels to steer. The Helica used cable-operated rear-wheel steering instead. When you turned the steering wheel, steel cables pulled the rear wheels left or right. This was inspired by how airplane rudders work. In the air, where aircraft pivot, around their center of gravity, rear steering feels natural. On the ground, it created chaos. When you turned the steering wheel, the back end of the car swung out wildly. Contemporary film footage from the 1920s shows Helicas making U-turns with the inside rear wheel lifting completely off the ground. The car looked like it was about to flip over sideways. Acceleration at low speeds was terrible. Propellers are designed to be efficient when moving fast through air. When the car was moving slowly, the propeller was incredibly inefficient. You would press the accelerator and very little would happen. But once you reached about 60 kilometers per hour or more, everything changed. The Helica came alive. The propeller found its efficiency sweet spot, and the car surged forward. If you somehow subscribed to this channel already, thank you. If you have not subscribed yet, please do. We have more incredible automotive stories coming soon. Once cruising at high speed, the Helica was remarkably fuel efficient. It could achieve 48 miles per gallon, which was extraordinary for any era. Top speed on standard models reached about 110 kilometers per hour, which is 68 miles per hour. That might not sound impressive today, but in the early 1920s, on roads that were designed for horses and only recently paved, 68 miles per hour felt like flying. The brakes only worked on the front wheels. The rear axle had no brakes whatsoever. Combined with the rear-wheel steering and the lightweight construction, stopping the Helica was an exercise in hope and prayer. And then there was the propeller itself, the spinning blade of death. The earliest Helica models had absolutely no protection around the propeller. None. Just a massive wooden blade, spinning at several thousand revolutions per minute, directly in front of pedestrians, animals, bicyclists, and anything else unlucky enough to be nearby. One automotive historian described the danger perfectly. He wrote that errant pedestrians and wayward pigeons alike could end up getting fed through a several thousand RPM blender. The visual impact alone was terrifying. Imagine walking down a street in Paris in 1921. Suddenly you hear a deafening roar approaching. You turn and see a teardrop-shaped wooden car hurtling toward you at high speed with a 5-foot airplane propeller whirring at the front. Film footage from 1924 shows onlookers literally frozen in shock as a Helica careened past them on a city street. Later models added some protection. Leyat installed a wire mesh cage around the propeller to prevent the worst accidents. But even with the cage, enormous dangers remained. In a front-end collision, that wooden propeller would shatter into dozens of high-velocity wooden shards. The Helica would become a mobile shrapnel bomb. Beyond the slicing risk, there were other serious problems. The propeller created a constant wind tunnel effect. You were sitting directly behind a spinning airplane propeller, traveling at highway speeds. You got blasted continuously with wind, dust, bugs, dirt, and debris. The sports models offered only tiny windshields. Some versions had no windshield at all. The noise was described as absolutely maddening. One modern automotive writer compared it to some teenager with a badly modified car and a terrible aftermarket exhaust. But far, far louder. You could hear a Helica approaching from several blocks away. The roar was unmistakable and unforgettable. Paris goes insane for the plane without wings. Despite every danger and impracticality, the Helica became a sensation. At the 1921 Paris Motor Show, Marcel Leyat unveiled his propeller car to the general public for the first time. The press went absolutely crazy. Newspapers called it the plane without wings and the car with wings. More than 600 potential buyers submitted inquiries. They wanted to own this insane machine. Some sources claim Leyat received over 500 orders for the Helica. The problem was production. Each Helica had to be hand-built to order. There was no assembly line. There was no mass production capability. Just Marcel Leyat and a small team of craftsmen building each car individually from scratch. Production was agonizingly slow. By the time Leyat fulfilled the first dozen orders, years had passed. The initial excitement was fading. The propeller car novelty was wearing off. The automotive world was rapidly moving toward conventional designs that emphasized safety, practicality, and affordability. Between 1919 and 1927, Leyat built approximately 30 Helicas in total. Of those 30, only 23 were actually sold to customers. The rest remained as prototypes, development vehicles, or unsold inventory. Pricing was a major obstacle. A Helica cost over $1,600. To understand how expensive this was, consider that a Ford Model A sold for $385 to $575 during the same period. The Helica cost 3 to 4 times as much as a mass-produced Ford. It was a luxury item for wealthy eccentrics who were willing to risk their lives for style and uniqueness. The people who actually bought one. Who would actually spend a fortune to buy a propeller-powered car? Gustave Coureau was one brave soul. He purchased a sports model Helica in 1921 and drove it for an entire decade. His adventures with the car inspired him to write a memoir titled Mon hélice au pays des merveilles, which translates to My Propeller in Wonderland. When Coureau finally finished with the car in 1930, he donated it to the Musée des Arts et Métiers in Paris. That same car remains on permanent display there today. The Peugeot family purchased an enclosed sedan model. This was one of the very few Helicas built with a roof and windows. That particular car stayed in the Peugeot family for over 100 years. In 2025, the Lumen Museum in the Netherlands acquired it for their collection. The Prince of Monaco's car collection also includes a Helica. Prince Rainier III started this famous collection in the 1950s. Not every owner had a happy experience. A man named Monsieur Carmagnol de Meursault lived in Burgundy and was known locally for driving fast. He purchased a Helica and decided to modify the suspension system. His modifications proved fatal. He became the only confirmed death directly associated with a Helica, and it resulted from his own modifications rather than the original design. 106 miles per hour in a wooden rocket. By 1925, production of the Helica had effectively ended. Marcel Leyat had run out of money again. Orders had stopped coming in. The dream appeared to be over, but Leyat was not quite finished yet. On September 7, 1927, Leyat brought a very special Helica to the Autodrome de Lina-Montlhéry. This was a famous French racing circuit where speed records were set. This particular Helica was different from all the others. It was a 3-wheeled design, stripped down, and built specifically for speed record attempts. That day, Marcel Leyat piloted his wooden propeller car around the track at 170 kilometers per hour. That is 106 miles per hour. Think about what this meant. In 1927, a Ford Model T topped out at around 45 miles per hour. Leyat's wooden propeller-powered machine, built in a small workshop, had achieved more than double that speed. One automotive writer described it as a truly suicidal speed in a propeller-driven road rocket made from plywood. The record stood as the fastest speed ever achieved by a propeller-powered car on land. It was a triumphant ending to a vision that never quite succeeded commercially. After 1927, Marcel Leyat never built another Helica. Why the most exciting car ever made failed. The Helica failed for almost every reason a car could possibly fail. Safety was catastrophic. The exposed propeller could maim or kill pedestrians and animals. The wire mesh guards added to later models helped reduce the danger, but could not eliminate the risk of wooden shrapnel in a crash. The rear-wheel steering made the car wildly unpredictable. Rolling over during turns was not a worst-case scenario. It was practically a certainty. Comfort was completely non-existent. You sat in a constant hurricane of wind, dust, and noise. The suspension was virtually absent. On cobblestone streets, which covered most of Paris in the 1920s, every single bump transmitted directly into your spine. Long trips were torture. Starting the car was a physical ordeal. You had to exit the vehicle, pull a starting cord with significant force, then sprint back and leap into the moving cockpit, before the car drove away without you. The price was astronomical. At over $1,600 when a Model A cost around $400, the Helica was accessible only to extremely wealthy buyers. The small market could not sustain production. Competition was improving at an incredible pace. By the mid-1920s, conventional automobiles from companies like Ford, Chevrolet, and Peugeot were becoming more reliable, more comfortable, and more affordable every single year. The gap between a normal car and a propeller car was not shrinking. It was widening rapidly. Funding never materialized. Leyat could not secure financial backing for mass production. Every car had to be built to order, one at a time. This made costs higher and production slower, creating a vicious cycle that eventually destroyed the enterprise. Remarkably, the French government never seemed to officially ban the Helica. Contemporary observers expressed amazement that Leyat somehow got his prototype licensed to drive on public roads. Eventually, strict safety regulations might have killed the propeller car. But bankruptcy and lack of demand got there first. The extraordinary second act. Most inventors would have been completely destroyed by such a comprehensive failure. Marcel Leyat simply moved on to something completely different. In 1927, the same year he set his speed record, Leyat invented an alternative music notation system. He called this system Mahler. He shared his musical ideas with Maurice Ravel, one of the most famous composers in France. Ravel was apparently intrigued by the concept. Leyat built a custom piano with 85 keys and an unusual alternating black and white keyboard layout. He taught his daughter Odette to play using his new musical system. On October 29, 1929, Odette gave a public performance at the Salle Molière in Lyon, demonstrating her father's methods to an audience. Leyat also returned to his first love, which was aviation. Between the 1920s and the start of World War II, he designed approximately 30 different aircraft. Many featured his innovative living wings concept, where the wing surfaces could articulate and change shape during flight. Marcel Leyat lived long enough to see his propeller car become a curiosity, then be completely forgotten, and finally be rediscovered by a new generation of automotive enthusiasts who appreciated its audacity. He died on December 3, 1986, at the age of 101 years old. That is a remarkably long life for someone born in 1885, where you can see a Helica today. Of the approximately 30 Helicas built, only 3 original vehicles are confirmed to still exist. The Musée des Arts et Métiers in Paris, France, displays the sports model that Gustave Coureau donated in 1930. It remains on permanent display in the transport section of the museum. If you visit Paris, you can stand next to the actual car that inspired Coureau's memoir about driving a propeller car through France. The Lumen Museum in The Hague, Netherlands, recently acquired the only surviving Helica with an enclosed body. This is the sedan model that the Peugeot family owned for over a century. The museum is world-renowned for its automotive collection. The Lane Motor Museum in Nashville, Tennessee, houses a faithful replica built from 300 original drawings. These drawings were discovered in what used to be Leyat's workshop in Meursault, France. The building is now a winery. The Lane Motor Museum also displays the 1932 Helicron, a related one-of-a-kind propeller car that was discovered in a French barn in the year 2000. A third original Helica was offered at auction in November 2025. This car had been reconstructed in the 1980s from original period parts. The auction estimate was 100,000 to 200,000 euros. The Helica has also appeared on television. In December 2021, Richard Hammond drove a Helica on The Grand Tour Presents Carnage à Trois. Jeremy Clarkson and James May watched in visible horror as Hammond piloted the propeller car through French streets. That segment introduced the Helica to millions of new viewers worldwide. The legacy of a magnificent failure. The Leyat Helica holds a completely unique place in automotive history. It is the only propeller car ever produced in series. It was not just built as a one-off prototype for publicity. It was actually manufactured and sold to real customers who drove them on public roads. Was it practical? Absolutely not. Was it safe? Not even remotely close. Was it commercially successful? By any business standard, it was a complete disaster. But Marcel Leyat's approach was genuinely ahead of its time in important ways. His obsession with aerodynamics and lightweight construction would eventually become central to automotive design decades later. Automotive historians credit his curved body panels and streamlined shape with inspiring serious research into automotive aerodynamics that began in the 1930s. Leyat demonstrated that thinking from a completely fresh perspective could yield extraordinary results. By applying aviation engineering principles to ground transportation, he created a machine that achieved fuel economy and speeds that conventional cars of his era simply could not match. Marcel Leyat saw a future where vehicles were lighter, more efficient, and designed to slip through the air rather than fight against it. That future eventually arrived. It just did not include propellers. The Helica remains one of the most audacious, most beautiful, and most terrifying machines ever built. It was a wonderfully terrible idea executed with absolute commitment by a man who dared to imagine that cars could be completely different than everyone assumed they had to be. Somewhere in Paris, in a museum near the Arts et Métiers metro station, that wooden teardrop with its spinning blade still sits on display. It stands as a monument to the engineer who nearly crossed the English Channel first, missed his chance by 3 weeks, and then decided to put airplane propellers on cars instead. If you enjoyed learning about this incredible piece of automotive history, please subscribe to the channel. We have many more fascinating stories about the weird, wonderful, and completely insane machines that engineers have built throughout history.